The sun rose hot and early over Baton Rouge, burning through a hazy morning like it had something to prove. In the back lot of the Willow Bend trailer park, humidity clung to the air like wet flannel. Rust streaked every roof. Junked lawn chairs leaned crooked under mossy oaks. It was a place people passed through, not settled in, unless they had nowhere else to go. Inside trailer number 14, Leonard Banks stirred awake, blinking against the stale air and the low hum of a struggling refrigerator. At 32, Leonard had the sunken cheekbones of a man who once dreamed big but learned to live small. His once athletic frame had grown narrow, his eyes tinged with fatigue and faint guilt. He sat up slowly, wiping the sweat from his neck with the hem of a yellowed t-shirt. Across the room, his wife, Teresa, slept curled up under a thin blanket, still wearing her work clothes. She hadn't even bothered to undress after her double shift. The woman had backbone, no doubt about it, working sunup to sundown cleaning motel rooms, then folding linens till her fingers cracked. It was the kind of loyalty most men dreamed of. Leonard, though, just felt trapped. He looked at her the way a man looks at a photo of his younger self, fond but distant. They'd married 5 years ago, back when he swore he'd turn things around. Get a solid job, buy a used pickup, maybe even a small place outside town. But that never happened. Not in Baton Rouge. Not in this economy. Leonard moved through the trailer barefoot, the floor sticky in places. He poured a cup of lukewarm coffee, bitter as his mood. The kitchen window was cracked open just enough to let in the sound of cicadas and the distant cough of someone revving a moped. His stomach twisted. He wasn't sure if it was the coffee or the weight of what he was hiding. Vanessa. Her name came uninvited, like a ghost whispering from the corner of his mind. Vanessa Hill, 27, Teresa's little sister. Lived just 3 trailers down. Pretty in a kind of trouble you can't ignore way. Long legs, sharp jawline, and eyes that always seemed to see through his excuses. She worked nights bartending at a dive off Highway 61, and her laugh, when it came, was like cracked glass, rough but unforgettable. It started small. A ride home, a drink, a secret, then another. And now, it was every Thursday at 4 p.m., like clockwork. No strings, no staying the night, just money on the counter and whiskey on the breath. Leonard leaned against the sink, staring into his coffee like it held absolution. But there wasn't any. Not for what he'd done, not for what was coming. Outside, the trailer park yawned into another sweltering Louisiana day. Quiet, still, and utterly unaware that a slow-brewing storm was already cracking from within. Thursday afternoons had a rhythm all their own in Willow Bend. By 3:45, the bar crowd hadn't woken up yet. The motel check-ins were still a few hours off, and Teresa was always deep in her second job at the laundromat across town. That left Leonard with an open window, not just of time, but of temptation. He walked the dirt path toward trailer number 17, a bottle of cheap whiskey tucked into a paper bag and a folded 20 in his back pocket. It wasn't much, but Vanessa had never asked for much. Not at first. When she opened the door, she didn't say anything. She just looked at him like a question she wasn't ready to ask. "Still got that couch?" Leonard asked, jerking his chin toward the inside. Vanessa leaned on the doorframe. Her tank top clung to her skin, and her hair was pulled into a lazy bun like she hadn't cared enough to fix it. But that was Vanessa, effortless, half-done, and still devastating. "It ain't moved," she said, finally stepping aside. "Still lumpy as hell. Still smells like spilled rum and regret." Leonard gave a crooked smile and stepped in. The inside of her trailer was dim, curtains drawn, fans spinning in slow circles overhead. There was a flickering candle on the counter, lavender scent, trying too hard to cover up mildew and cigarette smoke. He set the bottle on the table. "I brought the good stuff." She snorted. "You always say that, and it always tastes like floor cleaner." He grinned. That's the charm. They sat across from each other, the bottle between them, silence stretching long. Leonard finally broke it. "You still short on rent?" Vanessa didn't answer right away. Her nails tapped against the glass. "You know I am." Leonard pulled the 20 from his pocket and slid it across the table. "Call it early help." She stared at the bill for a long moment. Then her eyes lifted to his. You really think I'm that easy? He didn't flinch. I think you're tired. I think life's kicked you around. And I think I'm the only one offering anything but more pain. Vanessa picked up the 20, turned it over in her fingers. I'm not a whore, Leonard. I never said you were. You didn't have to. The words hung there like cigarette smoke. Then, just like always, she broke first. One drink. That's it. One drink, he agreed. But they both knew that was a lie. That was how it started. A bottle, a bill, a few hours in the haze of something neither of them could name. It happened the next Thursday, and the one after that. Leonard never stayed long. He'd slip out before dusk, his shirt wrinkled, his belt crooked, smelling of regret and lavender. Vanessa told herself she was doing what she had to. Rent wasn't getting cheaper. Tips were getting thinner. And the line between survival and shame was already blurred. But underneath the cash and whiskey, something else crept in, something sharper. Power. It thrilled her to know she could pull him away from Teresa, the perfect sister who went to church and paid her taxes and thought she had her life together. Vanessa, with her bad choices and late-night shifts, had taken something that wasn't hers, and it felt damn good. Meanwhile, Leonard started looking forward to Thursdays more than anything else in his life. At home, Teresa had become a ghost in work scrubs, dragging herself in just before midnight, smelling of bleach and worn-out hope. She still tried, cooked beans and rice when she could, rubbed his back when he claimed it hurt, but the fire had gone out long ago. And Leonard? He didn't have the courage to say it, but he felt it every time he watched her sleep with her jaw clenched tight from exhaustion. With Vanessa, it was different, dangerous, raw. She didn't ask for explanations, didn't ask him to be a man he no longer was. She just let him be broken, and somehow that felt like freedom. One Thursday, after a longer than usual session tangled in sweat and sheets, Leonard lay back and lit a cigarette. Vanessa leaned on one elbow, watching him. You ever feel bad? She asked. For what? This, she said, gesturing vaguely between them. What we're doing. Leonard blew out a plume of smoke. Only when I think about it. And how often's that? Not today. She laughed, short and sharp. God help us. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You think he's watching a place like this? Vanessa didn't answer. She just stared at the ceiling. In that moment, neither of them knew that what was growing between them wasn't lust or power or escape. It was something lethal, something festering just beneath the surface, waiting to burst. It started with the nights. Leonard would wake up drenched in sweat, the sheets sticking to his back like wet gauze. He'd sit on the edge of the bed in the dark, chest heaving, eyes staring into the space between the wall and his regrets. His mouth felt like dry chalk, his muscles ached, and no matter how much he slept, he always felt like hell warmed over. He told himself it was stress, or bad whiskey, maybe even that off-brand ibuprofen he'd been popping for weeks. It's nothing, he muttered to the bathroom mirror one morning, staring into his own sunken eyes. Just need a break. Just need a win. But the truth gnawed at him, quiet and cruel. He remembered Lashonda, the woman before Teresa. She'd been wild and free, a force of nature. When she stopped answering calls last spring, he figured she'd moved on or gotten locked up again. But then Marcus, one of his old bar buddies, mentioned she'd died in New Orleans. AIDS, man, Marcus had said, shaking his head. She didn't even look sick till the end. The word stuck to Leonard's brain like rust. AIDS. He hadn't seen Lashonda in over a year. But they'd shared things. Stupid things. Careless things. He'd told himself it wasn't his problem. Now he wasn't so sure. Vanessa noticed it, too, first in her body, then in her bones. It began with fatigue. Not the usual weariness from late shifts and cheap vodka, but something deeper, heavier, like her body was trying to drag itself down into the earth. Her back ached. Her joints flared. Cold sweats left her bed sheets clammy and foul. At work, she dropped a tray of beer bottles mid-shift. The crash turned every head in the rusty nail bar. Her manager cursed, told her to go home. That night, she slept 14 hours straight and still woke up trembling. I must be coming down with something, she whispered, watching her reflection in the mirror. Skin pale, eyes rimmed red, lips cracked. But deep down she knew, not exactly what, but that it was bad. Worse, she thought. Much worse than I'm ready for. She waited a week before dragging herself to the free clinic across town. The place smelled like bleach and quiet despair. She sat on a cracked plastic chair for 2 hours, surrounded by coughing strangers, until her name was called. A nurse pricked her finger and drew blood. Vanessa stared at the needle and wondered how many other stories like hers had bled into that tray. She didn't tell them about Leonard, or the money, or the lies. She just smiled faintly and lied. Just routine. The results would take a week. A long, godless week. Meanwhile, Leonard grew quieter at home. Teresa, ever observant despite her exhaustion, started to notice. "You've lost weight," she said one morning as he pushed his eggs around the plate. "Have I?" he replied without looking up. "You've been coughing too. It's the heat." She wanted to believe him. She needed to, because if she didn't, if she admitted what her gut had been whispering, the foundation of her whole life would crack. But when she reached for his hand that night in bed, Leonard flinched, just slightly. She pretended not to notice. "Maybe we should both go to the doctor," she offered softly. He didn't answer. A few days later, Vanessa's phone buzzed while she was in line at the pharmacy buying aspirin and ramen. The message read, "Ms. Hill, your test results are in. Please come in for a consultation." Her stomach dropped. The ride to the clinic was a blur. Her palms were sweating. The radio was off. Her breath shallow. She sat in the same chair as before, only this time the clock seemed to stop ticking. Dr. Simmons, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tired voice, gave her the news. "You tested positive for HIV." The words didn't register at first. Vanessa blinked at her as if she'd just been told the weather. She stared at the walls, then at the tile floor, then at her own hands. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "How?" The doctor explained transmission methods. Unprotected sex, shared needles, blood. Vanessa barely heard it. Her mind was already sprinting through names, faces, memories, motel beds, back seats of cars. And then, one name lit up like fire behind her eyes. Leonard. Back in the trailer that night, Vanessa curled up on her stained couch, the same one where they had once laughed, drank, and sinned. She stared at the ceiling fan, arms around her knees, rocking ever so slightly. He knew, she whispered to no one. That bastard knew, but she needed proof. And when she found it, there would be no more Thursdays at 4. There would be hell to pay. The sky over Baton Rouge was gray when Vanessa Hill stepped out of her trailer. Storm clouds hung low and heavy, like they were waiting for someone to give them a reason to break. She didn't bring an umbrella. She didn't care if she got wet. Her hands were shaking, but her steps were steady. She knew Teresa would be working late. First the motel, then the laundromat. That meant Leonard would be home alone, probably shirtless, probably half drunk, probably thinking life hadn't caught up to him yet. Vanessa was about to change that. As she walked past trailers slouched under years of poverty, her mind spiraled. The diagnosis still echoed in her head. HIV. For life. Medication. Doctors. Shame. And then came the image of Leonard's smirk. His voice. His hands. His damn money on her table like she was nothing but an exchange rate. He'd known. He knew. And he used her anyway. When she reached trailer number 14, she knocked once. No answer. Twice. Still nothing. The sound of running water hummed from inside. The shower. Typical. Just like him to be naked and relaxed while the world outside was bleeding. Vanessa reached under the flower pot by the steps. The spare key was still there. Teresa, always the trusting type. She slid it into the lock, turned it. The door creaked open. Inside, the place smelled like sweat, beer, and something oddly medicinal. A sterile, sour note that didn't belong in any working man's home. Vanessa stepped inside like a ghost returning to the scene of her own death. The living room was dim. A couple empty beer cans on the coffee table. Dirty dishes in the sink. But it wasn't the clutter that caught her eye. It was the half-open cabinet above the kitchen counter. Several orange pill bottles were lined up inside. She stepped closer. One red, tenofovir. Another, dolutegravir. Her stomach turned. These weren't antibiotics. These were antiretrovirals, the same drugs her doctor had listed. He knew. He'd been treating his infection. Secretly. Quietly. while still sleeping with her and with Teresa. Rage boiled her throat. Her hands clenched around the counter's edge. Then the water stopped. A moment later, Leonard emerged from the hallway, towel slung low on his hips, a lazy look on his face that froze the moment he saw her. "Vanessa." She didn't answer, just stared. Her eyes flicked toward the cabinet. He followed her gaze. "Why are you in my house?" he asked, voice low, defensive. "I know," she said coldly. "About the pills." His eyes darted again, guilt flaring in the corners. "You went through my stuff?" he snapped. "What the hell is wrong with you?" "I tested positive, Leonard." Her voice cracked, then steadied. "You gave it to me." Silence fell between them like a dropped coffin. Leonard's mouth opened. "Closed." She stepped forward. "You knew you were infected. And you still—" Her voice rose, trembling. "You still came to my place. Still took my body. Like it meant nothing." "I didn't know for sure," he muttered. "Bullshit," she barked. "You've got a damn pharmacy in your cabinet." He rubbed the towel against his neck, avoiding her gaze. "I didn't ask for this. LaShonda, she's the one who—" "Don't you dare blame a dead woman." "I was scared," Leonard exploded. "I didn't know how to tell anyone. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be a goddamn virus?" "And what about Teresa?" Vanessa shouted. "You've been sleeping with her, too. Did she deserve it? You think she signed up for this?" Leonard's jaw tightened. "You don't know what it's like living with this. Wondering when your time's up. Wondering who'll still love you after they find out. Then why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't want to be left alone," he roared. "You already are," she said quietly. The rage that had been simmering inside her burst like a dam. She lunged forward, fists clenched, but Leonard grabbed her wrist and shoved her backward. "You need to leave," he growled. Vanessa stumbled into the table. Her hand landed on a heavy glass ashtray. Without thinking, she hurled it at him. He ducked. The ashtray shattered against the wall. "Crazy bitch!" he screamed and charged toward her. She darted into the kitchen, breath ragged, heart pounding. And there, glinting beneath the flickering light, was the meat knife. She didn't think. She didn't scream. She just grabbed it. Leonard stopped in his tracks. "Put that down," he said, voice low, trembling now. "Stay back," she warned, holding the blade like a lifeline. "I swear I'll do it. You don't have the guts." He took a step forward. Vanessa's arm twitched. Leonard grinned, cruel and condescending. "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell Teresa that you gave it to me, that you've been sleeping around. You think she'll believe you over me?" That was the moment something inside her cracked. All the guilt, all the fear, all the shame, gone, replaced by something cold, clear, and final. She stepped forward. The knife went in clean. Leonard gasped. Blood bloomed across his towel. He looked down in disbelief. "You?" Then he dropped. Vanessa backed away, blade still in hand, blood painting her knuckles, her chest heaving. She stared at him, at the man who had ruined 3 lives and never even blinked. The storm finally broke outside. Rain slammed against the roof like judgment. Vanessa didn't move, didn't cry, didn't pray. She just whispered, "I told you." I'd had enough. By the time the rain stopped, the body was cold. The heat had finally broken in Baton Rouge, but inside trailer number 14, the air remained thick with sweat, with blood, and with the sour stench of something irreversible. The knife still jutted from Leonard's gut, his lifeless eyes staring toward the ceiling fan that spun slowly above, as if trying to rewind time. At 9:33 p.m., Teresa Banks stumbled through the front door, drenched and exhausted after 12 hours on her feet. She was carrying a bag of fried chicken and a bottle of dollar store aspirin when her shoes slid slightly on the floor. Wet, sticky, red. The takeout dropped from her hand. She looked up and screamed. Detective Frank Rossner was a man who had seen everything, or so he thought. At 58, with a gray mustache and a limp that had become part of his gait, he'd worked homicides across East Baton Rouge Parish for over 3 decades. Domestic disputes, drug hits, gang executions, you name it. But something about this one felt heavier. He stood at the threshold of Trailer 14, one hand on his hip, eyes narrowing. Devontae Leonard Banks, age 32, black male, deceased, stab wound to the abdomen. Time of death, estimated between 6 o'clock and 7 p.m. The murder weapon was still in place, sticking from the victim's torso like a flagpole in a battlefield. Cause of death's pretty damn clear, said Officer Jenkins, flipping his notepad. Wife found him when she came home from the laundry job. Rossner nodded. And her alibi? Rock solid, Jenkins replied. Clocked in at 12:02 p.m. at the Bayou Inn, then straight to Spin Cycle Laundromat. Got time cards and co-workers to back her up. Rossner stepped inside the trailer. The smell hit him first. Iron, mildew, and something medicinal. His eyes drifted to the kitchen cabinet, where several orange pill bottles sat neatly. He leaned in, reading the labels. Antiretrovirals, he muttered. This man had HIV. Jenkins blinked. You think it's related? Rossner didn't answer. Not yet. Teresa sat in the back of a squad car, shaking under a scratchy police blanket, fingers digging into the hem of her skirt. Rossner slid in beside her, notepad resting on his lap. Mrs. Banks, I'm Detective Rossner. I'm sorry for your loss, but I need to ask a few questions. She nodded hollow-eyed. When was the last time you saw your husband alive? This morning, she whispered. Before I left for work. He was still asleep. Did you two argue recently? No, she said, then paused. Not really. We didn't talk much at all anymore. Rossner tilted his head. Did you know he was HIV positive? Her face contorted in confusion and horror. What? No. Are you saying? I'm just asking. Teresa covered her mouth with her hands. Her shoulders began to shake. Oh my God, no. I didn't know. I swear. Rossner let her cry, silently noting the reaction. Genuine. Raw. Not rehearsed. Did your husband have any enemies? I don't know. He wasn't exactly popular, she sniffled. He kept to himself. Spent time with his friend Galen, 2 trailers down. Rossner scribbled. Any family? Other than you? No. Parents passed. No siblings. Just me and my sister. What's her name? Vanessa Hill. She lives a few trailers down. Number 17. She works at the Rusty Nail Bar. Rossner's pen stopped mid-sentence. Vanessa Hill. He'd heard the name before, usually attached to bar fights, rent disputes, minor complaints. Nothing major, but still, close proximity. Younger. Single. Would your husband have any reason to be close to Vanessa? Teresa blinked. They knew each other, of course. I mean, she's my sister. But close. She hesitated. No, I don't think so. But Rossner saw it, the flicker behind her eyes. A gut suspicion she hadn't allowed herself to admit until that very moment. Minutes later, Rossner and Jenkins were knocking on trailer 17. Vanessa opened the door. Her eyes were red. Her cheek was bruised. She wore a hoodie, zipped up despite the humidity. Miss Hill? Rossner asked. She nodded slowly. Mind if we come in? She stepped aside without a word. Inside, the trailer was dim like all the rest. A lavender candle burned on the counter. Rossner's nose wrinkled. It was the same smell that lingered on Leonard's clothes. You aware of what happened to Mr. Banks tonight? Vanessa sat slowly on the couch. Yeah, Teresa called me. Rossner didn't blink. Can you tell us where you were between 5 and 7 p.m.? She didn't answer immediately. I was here, she said finally. Wasn't feeling well. Jenkins scribbled. Anyone who can confirm that? No, I live alone. Where'd you get the bruise? I slipped at work. Rossner raised an eyebrow. Your manager said you didn't show up for work yesterday or today. Her lips tightened. I meant the day before. Rossner exchanged a glance with Jenkins. Miss Hill, he said, voice lower now, more pointed. A neighbor saw you leaving Leonard's trailer around 6 p.m. Vanessa's hands gripped her knees. I want to talk to him, she admitted quietly. I needed rent money. Did he give it to you? He wasn't home. She lied too quickly. Rossner didn't push, not yet. But in his mind, things were starting to align. Pills, hair, the bruise, the motive, and most of all, the silence. This ain't just a murder, he thought grimly. It's a damn storm waiting to unfold. The sun was just beginning to rise over Baton Rouge, casting a faint orange light over the rows of battered trailers, when Detective Rossner returned to his office. He hadn't slept. He didn't plan to. Not until this case stopped whispering in his ear like a ghost that refused to rest. He was halfway through reviewing the forensics report when a knock at the door pulled him out of his thoughts. Officer Jenkins stepped in, followed by a wiry black man in his late 30s, baseball cap pulled low, eyes shifting nervously. Says he's got information about the murder, Jenkins explained. Name's Galen Senecal, friend of the victim. Rossner stood. All right, Mr. Senecal. You said you knew Leonard Banks? Yeah, Galen nodded. Knew him pretty well. Rossner motioned to the chair. Take a seat. Start from the beginning. Galen sat, glanced at the door as if considering an exit, then leaned in. Look, I wasn't going to say anything. Didn't want to get involved. But when I heard he was murdered, I couldn't sleep. Thought maybe I could help. Rossner didn't blink. Go on. Leonard. He was messing around with his wife's sister. Vanessa. The room fell into stillness. You sure? Rossner asked, though he already knew the answer. Yeah, I'm sure, Galen said, voice low. He told me himself. Bragged about it. Said she needed money and he was helping her out. But it wasn't just about the cash. He said it made him feel alive again. Rossner leaned forward. Did he mention how long it had been going on? Few months, maybe more. Thursdays mostly. Like it was a damn schedule. Did Teresa know? No way, Galen said. He swore up and down she'd leave him if she ever found out. Rossner exhaled slowly, thoughts clicking into place. You ever hear anything about Leonard being sick? Galen stiffened. That's the other thing. He told me his old girlfriend died of AIDS. Said he got tested after. Came back positive. Didn't tell nobody. Not even his wife. And Vanessa? I don't think he told her either. I asked him, straight up, you using protection with either of them? And you know what he said? Rossner raised an eyebrow. Too late for that now. That's what he said. Like it didn't even matter. Rossner's jaw tightened. Thank you, Mr. Senecal. That's more helpful than you know. 15 minutes later, Rossner stood once again outside Vanessa's trailer. The morning air was cooler now, but the tension was rising like steam. He knocked. Teresa opened the door. She looked older than she had 12 hours ago, like the grief had aged her a decade overnight. Vanessa sat on the couch. Same hoodie, same guard eyes. Rossner stepped inside. Miss Hill, he said evenly, I have a witness. Someone who confirms you and Leonard were involved in an ongoing sexual relationship. Teresa turned sharply. What? Vanessa's eyes filled, but she said nothing. He also confirms Leonard was aware of his HIV status and knowingly exposed you, and your sister, without telling either of you. Teresa sank into a chair. No, that can't be. Rossner turned back to Vanessa. You want to keep lying? Her face broke. The tears came like a flood. Yes, she whispered. It's true. Teresa gasped, covering her mouth. I didn't mean for any of it to happen, Vanessa sobbed. It started out as rent money, that's all. But he kept coming back. And I let him. Teresa's voice cracked. How could you? You're my sister. Vanessa turned toward her, eyes pleading. I didn't know he was sick. I swear. Not until I went to the clinic. Then I found the pills in his kitchen. Then I knew. Rossner's voice softened, but remained firm. You went to confront him. Things escalated. Vanessa nodded, barely able to speak. He hit me. He tried to twist it, blame me. Said he'd lied to Teresa. I snapped. I didn't mean to. I didn't plan to. Rossner held up a hand. Vanessa Hill, you're under arrest for the murder of Leonard Banks. You have the right to remain silent. Jenkins stepped forward with cuffs. Vanessa didn't resist. She looked like a woman already halfway buried. Teresa sat frozen as the click of metal echoed through the trailer. As Vanessa was led outside, she turned back one last time. I'm sorry, Teresa. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to stop. Teresa didn't answer. She just stared at the blood on her floor, at the ruins of her life, at the two people who shattered her world, one dead, one in cuffs. Rossner followed them out into the light of a brand new morning. But there was nothing new about this story, only broken people, and consequences no one could outrun. The patrol car disappeared down the gravel road, carrying Vanessa Hill toward county lockup and a new identity she hadn't yet earned but already felt branded with. Murderer. Back inside trailer number 17, Teresa Banks sat on the edge of her sister's couch, the same couch where her husband had sat, touched, lied, and infected. She stared at the spot where Vanessa had just stood moments earlier. The candles still flickered on the counter, lavender-scented, mocking her. "She was right here," Teresa whispered. "Right under my nose." The silence in the trailer felt like punishment, cold and absolute. Her mind twisted in circles. The betrayal, the diagnosis, the possibility. He slept with us both. He was sick. He didn't say a word. Her stomach turned. She bolted for the sink and emptied what little she'd eaten that day. Her hands gripped the counter so tightly her knuckles turned white. That afternoon, Detective Frank Rossner escorted Teresa to the Baton Rouge Public Health Clinic. He'd done a lot of things in his career, told mothers their sons were dead, put cuffs on children, zipped up body bags in living rooms. But this felt different. Teresa sat quietly in the exam room, the paper sheet crinkling beneath her. She held her purse in her lap like a shield. Her fingers shook as she filled out the intake form. Rossner waited outside the room, hat in hand, watching the nurses pass with clipboards and solemn faces. He hated places like this, not because of the sickness, but because of what it revealed, how fragile people really were when stripped of pride and pretense. An hour later, Teresa came out. Her face was pale. Her eyes didn't look angry, just gone. "They said it'll take a couple days," she said, voice hollow. Rossner nodded gently. "We'll be here for whatever you need." She didn't respond, just walked past him, back into a world that no longer made sense. Word traveled fast in trailer parks. By nightfall, everyone at Willow Bend knew the basics. Leonard Banks was dead, his wife's sister had been arrested, and something about HIV. The details were foggy, but the whispers were sharp. At the Rusty Nail Bar, where Vanessa once poured drinks and laughed at bad jokes, regulars gossiped over bourbon and pool tables. "I heard she stabbed him in the stomach," one man said. "Nah, I heard it was in the back." "Coward move," another replied. "She gave him the disease, or he gave it to her?" someone else asked, whispering like it was contagious through conversation. The bartender shook her head. "Sad damn business either way." Teresa didn't return to work that week. She unplugged the landline, turned off her phone, closed the curtains, and curled up on the floor of her bedroom like the sunlight itself might accuse her. She replayed every moment, every kiss, every dinner, every night Leonard had come home late, and she believed his lies. "You fool," she told herself. "You let this happen." But the truth was, she hadn't let anything happen. It had been done to her, and now she had to wait to find out if the consequences were carved into her blood. On the third morning, the phone rang. Teresa stared at it from across the room. It rang 4 times. 5. She finally answered. It was the clinic. There was a pause. Then a soft voice, neutral, rehearsed, but not unkind. "Mrs. Banks, your test came back positive." She closed her eyes. Everything inside her went silent. No screaming, no weeping, just stillness. Detective Rossner showed up later that day with paperwork from the DA's office. He knocked gently, expecting to be turned away. But Teresa opened the door. She didn't look angry. She looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it more than most things in his career. She nodded once. "What happens next?" "We charge Vanessa. Manslaughter's likely. Maybe second-degree murder. Depends on how the DA reads the scene." Teresa didn't react. She didn't plan it. She just broke. "I know. She was all I had left," Teresa whispered. Rossner nodded. "I know that too." At the arraignment, Vanessa stood in an orange jumpsuit, hair pulled back, hands cuffed at her waist. Her lawyer entered a plea of not guilty by reason of emotional disturbance. The courtroom was quiet. No press, no crowd, just a few murmurs in the back pews. Teresa sat in the second row, arms folded tightly. When Vanessa's eyes found her, Teresa looked away. Not in hatred, not in forgiveness, just because she didn't know who she was anymore. Not as a wife, not as a sister, and not as a woman whose future had been rewritten in the blood of a man who claimed to love her. That night, Rossner wrote his final report. Under motives, he typed, betrayal, neglect, disease, silence. Under cause of death, penetrating wound to abdomen. Under broader cause, he didn't write it, but he thought it. Shame, lies, and the cost of never telling the truth. 6 months later, Teresa Banks stood in line at the pharmacy inside a low-budget clinic off Florida Boulevard, clutching a white slip of paper that prescribed survival. Her hands trembled only slightly now. Behind the bulletproof glass, the pharmacist barely looked at her as he slid the brown bag across the counter. "Refill on the antiretrovirals," he said flatly. Teresa nodded, thanked him, and left without making eye contact. She learned not to. On her way out, she passed a mother with a crying toddler, an elderly man hunched in a wheelchair, and a nurse arguing over Medicaid codes. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. The world moved on around her, business as usual. But inside Teresa's world, nothing had ever returned to usual. She lived alone now. After the murder, the trailer had been deemed uninhabitable, not by the city, but by Teresa herself. She couldn't scrub the memory of blood off the floor. Couldn't unsee the image of Leonard with that blade in his stomach. Couldn't sleep in the bed they once shared. She moved into a subsidized one-bedroom on the other side of Baton Rouge, close enough to her job at the motel, far enough from Willow Bend to pretend it had all happened to someone else. But pretending never lasted long. On the first Tuesday of every month, Teresa walked to the post office and checked the P.O. box she had opened under her maiden name. That's where Vanessa's letters came. Always handwritten, always signed, always unopened. There were 6 now. She kept them in a drawer beneath her bed, still sealed. "I just can't," she whispered one night, staring at the envelopes like they might catch fire. Not yet. Vanessa Hill, inmate number 74261, was serving a 15-year sentence at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. She'd pled down to voluntary manslaughter, citing extreme emotional disturbance and betrayal. The court, recognizing the layers of trauma and deceit, gave her the minimum sentence with eligibility for parole in 7. The warden described her as quiet, polite, never problem. But every Tuesday, after the last head count, Vanessa would sit on the edge of her bunk with a ballpoint pen and a yellow legal pad and write to her sister. Every week, without fail, the letters were her way of staying human, even if they never got read. In one letter she wrote, "I don't dream much anymore, but when I do, it's always the same. We're on the porch back home. You're shelling peas. I'm braiding your hair. And Mama's still alive. And Leonard doesn't exist. It's the only version of us I can live with now." Detective Frank Rossner retired that fall. 60 years old, 2 heart stents, and 35 years of stories he wished he could forget. Leonard Banks' case stuck with him, though. Not because it was brutal. He'd seen worse. Not because it was complicated. It was painfully simple. It stayed because of what it said about people. About how far someone could fall when love turned toxic. About how silence could kill more than any weapon. And about how betrayal didn't just break hearts, it fractured identities. One day, Rossner ran into Teresa at the farmer's market. She was picking through tomatoes, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, hoping to blend into the crowd. She saw him first. "Detective." He smiled. "Teresa." There was a pause. "How are you?" he asked gently. She shrugged. "Alive." Rossner nodded. "Sometimes that's enough." She looked down at her bag of produce. "Sometimes it has to be." He hesitated, then said, "She asks about you, you know." "I figured." She writes. "I know." He waited a beat. "You gonna read them someday?" Teresa's jaw clenched, then softened. "Maybe. When I stop hating her just long enough to miss her." Rossner didn't push. He knew grief moved on its own damn clock. Before he left, he said something that surprised even himself. "She loved you, you know, even if she did it all wrong." Teresa looked up. "We all did it wrong." And that was the most honest thing either of them said all day. Back in her apartment, Teresa placed the tomatoes in the sink, washed her hands, then went to the drawer beneath her bed. She pulled out the letters. 6 envelopes, still sealed. She picked up the top one, held it under the lamplight, then sat on the edge of the mattress. Her fingers hovered over the flap, and slowly, for the first time, she tore it open. Inside, in the familiar looping script, Vanessa had written just a single page. "Dear Teresa, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, even when I lost my way, you were the compass I hated ignoring. If I could take it all back, I would. But if you can still remember the sound of our mother's laugh, or the way we used to dance in socks on the linoleum, then I haven't lost you entirely. I love you. Always. V. Teresa sat still for a long time. Then she cried. For her sister, for herself, for the version of her life that might have been. And when the tears finally stopped, she reached for the next envelope.